So we are taking the night boat tour in the Chicago lake.
Chicago's leading lady. I got a lot of great stuff that I'm going to talk to you about tonight. I'm from Chicago myself and I love talking about this city, so hopefully you'll enjoy my tour. But before I do get down to that, I have to go over some safety things with you. The safety equipment here that I want to talk about is our life jackets. The crew will distribute them if they're needed, but we're not planning on using them. We do like to let you know where they are though for your own reference. So we got some white boxes that are on either side of the wheelhouse. That's where the captain is behind me. There are some more white boxes on the top deck and the back. Those are all pictures, something called Spanish Renaissance Revival. The specific inspiration for that building is a cathedral tower located in Seville, Spain, called the Giralda Tower. And the material used on the cladding of the outside of this building here is called terracotta. Terracotta has really strong fireproofing qualities, and it's really got serious here in Chicago about fireproofing our buildings. So terracotta became a really popular material in building construction for its fireproofing qualities. And the Wrigley building here is a great example of its use. We're gonna hop onto the other side of the river now for our next building. It's gonna be this one that's really skinny there. It's a little lit up at the top, off to the left. This really skinny skyscraper here is called the Mather Tower, completed in 1928 in a neo-Gothic style. And for 3 days when this building was completed, it was Chicago's tallest building. One title it has maintained all of its life is the title of Chicago's skinniest skyscraper. Now, to give you an idea of just how skinny it is, especially up there at the top, there's no room for an elevator shaft. So you've got to use the stairs to get all the way to the top of that building. Now, by the 1990s, they had been kind of neglecting the helicopter to lift a lot of those new materials into place. And this happened in the early 2000s. Because AMA Plaza was designed by a man named Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. And for a long time, he was the teacher of Bertrand Goldberg, who designed Marina City there. But as you look at Marina City and compare it to AMA Plaza, you can see that these buildings don't share a whole lot in common. One's very boxy, rectangular, a lot of right angles. Marina City, on the other hand, is very curvy, lots of sort of like a corn cob shape, some people say. If you look at it from above, they kind of look like trying to be different. And that's why they're usually some of my favorite buildings, because they're trying to be a little bit more unique than those international style buildings that were popular before them. Let's look on the right side of the river now at this red brick building here with the clock tower. It's lit up pretty nicely here at night. This building is called the Reed Murdoch Center, opened in 1914. Back then it was warehouses. There's a wholesale showroom for all of their products. Other retailers used it too. And they just needed all this space to basically fit all the merchandise. Buildings is the north branch of the river, and then to the almost to our right now as we spin around under that double-decker bridge is the south branch, and the south branch will ultimately get you to the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico if you wanted to go that far. Take a look at those two skyscrapers directly to our right, especially the one there with the very narrow base. These buildings had an interesting dilemma to deal with when they were designing these buildings. There are active railroad tracks that hug the water tank that as the building is swaying in one direction, the water in that tank is sloshing to the opposite side of the building's sway, and that is helping to mitigate. Including a pretty novel thing, especially for 1927, a car element in love with French Gothic cathedrals. So in their design, they used a lot of French Gothic cathedral sort of elements with this building, especially there at the top. You can see the Art Deco, so he tried to sort of harken back to it in this building's design. Some of you might be familiar with 30 Rockefeller Plaza in New York City. That is an actual Art Deco building design elements in common with 30 Rockefeller Plaza. It's also sort of emulating that building as well. So it's kind of like a distant cousin of 30 Rockefeller Plaza. Now, one final note here about NBC Tower. You'll notice a little more completed in 2020. Now, the architect of the St. Regis is Jeannie Gang, and she's actually a homegrown architect here from Chicago. Her Studio Gang Architects, started up here in Chicago, and their first building ever was actually here in Chicago. It's off to our right here with the wavy balconies in between these two other buildings that are closer to us. That one with the wavy balconies there is called Aqua, and Jeannie Gang, that was her first building. So that end of that glass is allowing more or less sunlight into the floors depending on how wide or narrow they are. And that's making it more efficient and thereby environmentally friendly to heat and cool the building. Now, it's also making it more visible to birds, because a lot of these guys river walk. These days, people like being near the river. It's an amenity for the city. But even just about 40 years ago, the river was not seen as an amenity. It was the consistency of chocolate pudding. It was so polluted. And all of this chocolate pudding was flowing into Lake Michigan our citizens were drinking that water, getting a new canal, and after a few days of filling itself out and the river figuring itself out, it realized that gravity always wins, and because it now had this lower elevation to flow into, it did indeed reverse and start. Things they installed was a Ferris wheel. Now the Ferris wheel you see here right now is not the original one. The original one was installed in 1993, and this new one replaced it in 2016. On every side of the building are these steel beams that make the shape of an X, and you've got multiple of these X-shaped steel beams as the building rises for the building. So most of the time you don't see the structural engineering of a building. Usually all of this stuff is inside of it. They had to be light to ensure that they were not going to sink into it. Now, most of these buildings were being supported in those days by their outside walls. So as the buildings got taller, the walls would have to get bigger to support the added height. And because the buildings were mostly made out of stone or bricks, these are heavy materials. And the thicker the walls got as the building got taller, so it was limited to about 5 floors, because after that point, the building was just going to be too heavy. To ensure that the buildings were as light as they possibly could be, besides their exterior. sales of the residential units in that building has been successful, so it's worked out. They did have to lose some condo sales because those 2 floors were supposed to be more residential units, but I think some of that merchandise included weapons. So one day they were making their trip back from Michigan back to Chicago, and as they were headed over here towards the city, they ran aground on a sandbar. Their voice was the loudest of the lobbying cities. So loud did we make
We're just waiting for the gate to open. So we are heading back. It's almost the end of the boat tour. It's actually 90 minutes. It's really nice and worth it. So if you have a chance, go book the night tour. I think the night tour is much better than the day one. But I do have a day tour. I mean, like a day boat tour as well. Will happen on, I think, on Sunday. So yeah, but I always like the night tour because of the lights of the building. Okay, I think this is the almost the end. So we'll just wait for the gate to open, and then we'll show you the last bit of the boat tour.
Folks, there it is again, that horn we heard earlier. This time means we can exit the river, be walking towards the river, and make our way back towards the dock here. But we do got about 10 minutes before we make it to the dock, so I'm going to fill that time out with a few more things that I have not yet talked about. The main thing... of the construction to continue on. So even though they had dug the foundation for this building, they could not go any further. Now they should start construction. In the meantime, you're going to see the lot's just going to be right off to the right after we exit from under the bridge. But like I just said, there's nothing to see there. If you look on Google Earth or something, or if you were to be in one of the high-rises nearby, you can look down and see the hole that is the foundation of that building. But that's all there is. There's a big hole there right now. So the Trump International Hotel and Tower was completed in 2009, and it is Chicago's second tallest building. Now it gets there with a little bit of help because it's got a spire on top. If you remember our discussion about spires. Alrighty, so we're headed into our dock now, which means that our time is sadly coming to an end. While we're docking, we just ask that you remain where you are. Let us tie up the boat, get the gangway back on the boat so that we can exit here or allow you to exit. The captain is going to make an announcement about when it is safe to disembark the vessel. This is a good time to make sure you got all your possessions, so personal items, purses, hats, glasses, phones. Also make sure that you bring your children off the boat with you. Any children left on board will be put to work. That's how I got this job. My parents were careless, they left me here and they never came back, so the company just decided to put me to work. So be a responsible parent and take your kids home with you. Now, if you did like the